Well, it's good to see you here, and I'm sure you all enjoyed your first week of flipped learning. If you remember from the pie chart we negotiated last week, on this part you said there were some certain aspects of child language acquisition you wanted me to cover in class that you want to clear on. So I've put them on the board here. I'll talk you through them together. If you remember, in the resources part of our pie, there was some reading and some viewing for you to do. I've put those up there, the video I wanted you to look at, and the refreshers for the reading. So let's just check that everybody's done the prerequisite reading and viewing. So the video was Bingo on the Bone, an early years piece of reading. Just make sure you've read that. Sorry, an early years piece of viewing that I put online for you so you can see how an early years text functions. And then your reading was Sarah Thorne chapter 9, Revision Express chapter 2, and Cambridge International English chapter 8. So that should cover all the key terms that you need to know for answering a module on childhood language acquisition. If there are questions, you can mail me afterwards, but I want to use this time as a premium to explain and to establish the most important facets of childhood language acquisition. Okay, so number one, key terms. Noam Chomsky, very, very famous in the 60s. He comes up with this idea of a language acquisition device, or a LAD. In other words, he says we are all innately hot-wired for language. And no matter what happens to us, we will, because of the way our neurology is made up, be able to produce language. Skinner, a behavioralist, says, whoa, hold on a moment. That's not the case. What about children who've had no contact with others? They don't produce such good language. So Skinner said there must be something that helps us switch on our language. And he called that something a language acquisition support system. And this will be the work you do with your peers, your parents, your siblings when you're little. So we've got a lad and a lass, Chomsky and Skinner. And those are our two basic concepts of how we learn language when we're little. And we can expand on that a little bit with two psychologists called Bruner and Piaget. Now they both argued that until we've got a concept in our minds, we can't do the language. So that's why it's not until you're about 3 that you can start to do tenses in language, because you have a concept of time, you have a concept of past, present and future, and that's when you can begin to do tenses in the past, present and future. And similarly, that comes about at the same time as permanence theory, when you work out that just because you can't see something, it hasn't gone altogether, it still exists. So until you have a concept, you can't do the language associated with it. And that's what Bruner and Piaget talked about. And that also comes into linguistic determinism in spoken language and social groups. Linguistic determinism, and we may as well mention it here, is connected with ideas that if you don't have a language to talk about a concept, then you can't have the concept. And Orwell talks about in 1984 in Newspeak, the proles have language such as liberty, freedom and rebellion deleted from their language, and by not having that language they can't have the concepts. So, 4 main theorists, Chomsky, Skinner, Bruner and Piaget. Now, Skinner's theory of the lass seems to be born out of the case study of Jim, a child of deaf parents. His mum and dad thought it was enough for him to sit in front of the television and he would learn. Of course he didn't. And he didn't because it was too passive, and he was significantly retarded in his language development and only caught up with intensive linguistic therapy. Another very important case is that of Jeannie. Jeannie sadly was tied to a chair until she was about 13 or 14, and social services found out about this in America, caught up with her parents, managed to put her into care, but of course she never developed any particular language beyond making sentences of 2 or 3 words, because she'd never been exposed to that lass, that support system that switched on her language, that allowed her neurology to develop the connections to speak language. So the 2 case studies of Jim and Jeannie seem to corroborate what Skinner is saying, that there is a language acquisition support system, and without it, you will never fully develop the ability to speak. So we have to have some key phrases now to talk about the phases of development. Polyphrastic, one word, many meanings. Okay, so from a little up to about the age of 18 months, daddy can mean all men. Post-polyphrastic, we go beyond having one word for many things, and we begin to differentiate between daddy and man. Telegraphic, we begin to put sentences together of 2 or 3 words at the ages of 3 or so. And that's really the phase that Jeannie never got beyond, because that plasticity of her brain wasn't tapped into in the last. Now, motherese, or a caretaker language, this is the simplified language that mums or dads or caregivers use with little ones. Oh, there's a little Johnny Wonny Woo, pick up the pencil-y wensely. That's the kind of slow speaking repetition of vowel sounds that characterizes motherese and then encourages the infant to respond to such simplistic terms. The motherese and the caretaker language is supported by early years books which has similar simplistic sentences that repeat vowel sounds and plosive sounds. That reduplication of vowel sounds is critical. Mum, mum, dad, dad. Children tend to repeat it, and that's why motherese and these early years books, they tend to replicate that reduplication of vowel sounds and plosive sounds in the infant speaking. And finally, Halliday comes up with 7 functions of language, the most important of which, and you can see that in your Revision Express chapter 2, is the imaginative aspect of language for children. Children, especially under the age of 3, are incredibly imaginative, and they will narrate stories to themselves, they'll play with language, they'll innovate with it, and this carries on into their early teenage years. So there is a brief summary of child language acquisition. The reading you should have done, the key terms you should know, the video you've already seen. Has anybody got any questions? If not, then we'll proceed with the next phase of childhood language acquisition.